They called him the zillionaire. But Elijah Morgan had stopped answering to that name. Once he was the man who could buy time zones, turn dust into diamonds and cities into empires. But he was about to become something far greater and far freer. He was going to give it all away. It all started with a quiet moment. No press release, no big announcement. Just Elijah, standing on the balcony of his glass tower, looking down at a city that sparkled like a handful of stars spilled onto the earth. The wind howled around him. Billboards flashed his name, Elijah Morgan, the man who owns tomorrow. He whispered to the night, "Then why do I feel like I've already lost today?" Behind him, his assistant entered. "Sir," she said carefully, "your net worth just hit $1,800,000,000,000. He didn't turn. Instead, he asked softly, "Do you think the ocean ever gets tired of waves? It just keeps giving, wave after wave. And yet, it never runs dry. Maybe that's how I should live." That night, he made a decision that would ripple across human history. His first act of rebirth began far from skyscrapers and stock markets, in Madagascar, where the red earth cracked under a merciless sun. Drought had turned villages into ghost towns. When Elijah arrived, no one believed he was real. Why would a man who could buy a continent come to a place forgotten by rain? He walked among them with no cameras, no entourage, just a notebook and a bottle of water he refused to drink alone. He saw mothers digging for moisture in dry riverbeds and fathers praying to clouds that never came. That night, he sat with the village elders and said, "I don't want to build a charity. I want to build a miracle." They laughed gently, not with disrespect, but with disbelief. One old woman touched his hand and said, "Sir, miracles don't live here anymore." He smiled. "Then let's bring them home." Elijah poured his resources, his engineers, and his heart into a project no one thought possible, a massive solar-powered desalination plant that could turn ocean water into life-giving streams. He refused to name it after himself. He called it Maji, the local word for water. For months, nothing worked. Sandstorms destroyed equipment, pipes burst, and skeptics grew louder. But Elijah stayed. He ate the same meager meals as the workers and slept in a tent among them. Then one dawn, as the first rays of light kissed the horizon, a low hum began to rise from the heart of the plant. Then came the sound, a rush, a roar, a river being born. Water. Sweet, clear, endless water gushing out of dry pipes like liquid light. Children screamed in joy. Women danced. Men dropped to their knees in awe. And Elijah, the richest man on earth, stood silent, tears carving trails through the dust on his face. The desert was alive again. And so was he. The plant did more than just quench thirst. It rebirthed the land. Within a year, trees grew where none had stood for generations. Fields turned green. The wind smelled of rain. And something strange began to happen. Elijah's wealth, which he had poured into the project, tripled. New investors appeared out of nowhere. Old patents he'd forgotten suddenly became profitable. His accountants were baffled. "Sir," one said, "this doesn't make sense. You're giving money away, and your portfolio is growing faster than ever." Elijah just smiled. Maybe money finally realized what it was born to do: move. Inspired by this miracle, Elijah began building communities like Maji all across the world, from Kenya to Peru, from Bangladesh to Bolivia. Each one was powered by local labor, clean energy, and unconditional generosity. His greatest creation came 5 years later, a city named Aurora, where poverty had no citizenship. Aurora wasn't built on gold or oil, but on love and solar light. Hospitals healed for free, schools opened their doors to everyone, and laughter echoed through the streets. When journalists asked why he'd spent billions without profit, he answered, "Because profit was never the point. People were." Years passed, and something beautiful unfolded. The more Elijah gave, the more the world gave back, not in currency, but in grace. Where he funded hospitals, diseases were cured. Where he built schools, geniuses emerged who solved global problems. Scientists called it coincidence. Spiritual leaders called it divine. Elijah called it the law of flow. "When you open your hand," he said, the universe fills it again. When you close it, you choke the river that feeds you. And so, he kept his hands open. One evening, years later, Elijah returned to Madagascar. The once barren land now shimmered with life. An old woman he barely remembered approached him. Her eyes were bright, her hands rough from years of planting. She said, "You brought the rain back to our land." Elijah smiled. "No, you brought it back. I just reminded it where to fall." The villagers gathered around, holding lanterns that glowed like stars. They began to sing a song they'd written for him, a song about hope, renewal, and gratitude. As he listened, Elijah felt a warmth no wealth had ever given him. It was peace. That night, standing under the same sky he'd once stared at as a lonely tycoon, Elijah wrote in his journal, "The more I give, the more I have. I used to think wealth meant owning rivers of gold. Now I know the richest river flows from the heart, and it never runs dry." He fell asleep to the sound of real rain tapping gently on his window, as if heaven itself was saying thank you. News of his miracles spread across the planet. Billionaires, once obsessed with competition, began building wells and planting forests. Governments launched Elijah Acts, laws that rewarded generosity. And quietly, almost invisibly, humanity began to heal. Elijah never stopped giving. He gave until there was nothing left to give, and yet he never ran out. When asked how, he'd laugh and say, "Because blessings aren't a number, they're a direction. They flow to where hearts are open." And so they flowed, through him, around him, and beyond him. He had become what he was always meant to be, a river that never runs dry. The zillionaire no longer owned the world. He watered it. And from every seed of kindness he planted, a forest of blessings grew. Proof that the greatest currency on earth is a generous heart. If this story moved you, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content that explores the power of the human spirit. Thank you for watching.